introduced the TS-435XeU. This is our new 4-bay short depth rack mount. It's quite similar to the TS-431XeU that we've had on sale for quite a while. Some big improvements though. So the CPU has gone up to 2.2 gigahertz now, from 1.7 gigahertz that it was before. The RAM has gone up as well, so we can have a maximum RAM of 32 gig versus the 8 gig on the previous unit. And we've also added M.2 NVMe slots that we never had before, and the onboard 1 gig LAN ports have been boosted up to 2.5 gig. It still has the dual 10 gig connections on the back as well, so you're getting a lot in this rather small package. So we'll jump straight into it. So here's a picture of the front of the device with all the different lights. So it's very compact. The SSD slots can be used for a couple of purposes, which we'll talk about. So you can use that with our SSD caching feature, or you can use it for Q tier, which is different tiers of storage within the NAS. So the 10 gig SFP Plus ports are on board with the 2.5 gig ports. They're not added in with a PCI Express card or anything like that. To install the NVMe M.2s, you do have to take off the lid, so it's about 5 screws I think on the top. So you pop the lid off and you'll be able to see the M.2 slots inside. It's very easy to install those. So the depth is sort of 40% less than other conventional racks. Shown there is the optional rail kit. You can just mount it directly with the ears that we supply in the box. We supply the ears and some little handles that you can get for sliding it in and out of the rack, but there is an optional rail kit. So if you do have the room for the rail kit, you can use it. Even in a lot of comms racks, the rail kit might fit. The smallest size for the rail kit between the posts is just under 50 centimeters. But if you don't have that room to spare and 30 centimeters is what you're after, you can mount it just on the front post with the ears. It's quite a light unit, very compact, very small. So here it is shown. You see those little handles on the rack mount ears on the side there. So this is just a bit about the main CPU. So it's a 64-bit ARM Cortex from Marvell. It's a quad core. It supports DDR4 RAM, and we've got the PCIe Gen 3 on there, which allows us to use the NVMe Gen 3 by 1 slots that are in there. It's also very low on the power consumption as well. So installing extra RAM, if you did want to take it up from the standard RAM up to the maximum of 32 gig, it is just removing the 5 screws from the top, removing the top plate just as you would with the NVMe's, and there's a single RAM slot, so you can change that out to go up to the 32 gig RAM. All of the part numbers there for the different RAM we support are listed over there on the right hand side for you. So again, you can use the SSDs on this device in two ways. One is Ssd Cache to accelerate the performance of data that's on the hard drives, particularly useful in parity RAID modes like RAID 5 and RAID 6. The other option is to use Q tier. So in QTS we do have a feature called Q tier, which allows you to set 2 different performance tiers. So you've got the hard drive tier, which has its own RAID, its own capacity, and you've got the SSD tier, again with its own RAID and capacity. And those 2 capacities are merged together, and Q tier will automatically check the data. It's going to move the data around. It's going to monitor what's hot data, warm data, cold data, and move it to the different tiers. So you can have up to 3 tiers with Q tier. In this NAS, you'll probably only use 2 because you've got main drive bays. You could have, say, 2 hard drives, 2 SATA SSDs and 2 NVMe SSDs if you wanted to split it into the 3 tiers. But basically we're going to move the data that's more likely to be accessed, hot data if you like. We're going to put that into the NVMe storage, lesser access data into the warm data storage. That would possibly be something like a SATA SSD, and your cold data would be put down onto the much larger, much slower tier, which would be the hard drive tier. So you can set it in a few different modes. Automatic is the one I normally leave it in, but you can schedule it to happen at certain times if you wish. Just to illustrate that with all of our NAS that have 3.5-inch drive bays for hard drives, all of the drive trays do have separate screw holes marked on them, and we do supply the screws in the box to be able to use 2.5-inch SSDs in those drive trays. So the screw holes on the trays line up so that when you put a SATA SSD there, it's going to line up the connector into the back of the NAS for the backplane where it connects. So typically in most of our NAS, you'll get some larger silver screws, that's for the hard drives, and you'll get some smaller black screws, and they're typically for the SSDs when you're installing them. So here's a rear view of the TS-435XeU, so you can see all the different ports. So on the left hand side we've got the 2.5 gig LAN ports, got a pair of those. A little further to the right you've got the two 10 gig SFP Plus LAN ports, again built right in. If you were to need features such as Wacom LAN or anything like that, you can only do that through the 2.5 gig ports, which do also work at 1 gig. So you can't do Wacom LAN to the SFP Plus ports on this NAS. And so if you did need that, you might want to connect at least one of those 2.5 gig ports for the Wacom LAN. You can still set up all data access once it's powered on to go through the SFP Plus ports, but that's what you can use the 2.5 gig ports, management, Wacom LAN, some extra features. There are 3 small fans on the back. None of these fans are for the power supply, so the power supply is completely fanless itself, so it's a separate module within it. So it's not making any extra noise for the power supply as with some other NAS, so it's just going to be as quiet as possible. It's a pretty quiet device. In full operation, it really only uses between 30 and 35 watts. It's very, very quiet, very low on the power usage. That's with tested with 4 drives and 2 NVMe's when we were testing that. So the noise level as well is also very quiet, especially for a 1U Rackmount NAS. So in operation, it's pretty quiet for a NAS of this size. So let's move in. So it's shipped with QTS5 as standard. So what I'm going to do in a moment is I'm going to go through the full setup with QTS5. We'll fast forward the bits that take a while, but you'll see the full process from setup, from completely out the box, factory fresh. All I've done is put drives in it and connected it up. We'll go through the wizard and then we'll set up some storage on it. I'll set it up with an SSD cache for the purpose of this demo. So there's just some highlights of QTS5, and this NAS, because it runs QTS5, can use our enterprise grade snapshots. So you can use a lot of different snapshot options. So you've got snapshotting the volumes themselves. You can also do things like snapshot replication to get the snapshots off to another QNAP perhaps. So it's a different way to do that. But restoring from snapshots is up to 10 times faster than copying it back from a backup source. It's very quick to get data back if you were to lose any data. So here's the limits on the snapshots. So you can have a maximum of 256 snapshots per NAS, and that's up to 64 per volume. So if you've got a few different volumes, you can hit that 64 maximum there. So right, what we'll do now is we'll jump straight into setting it up. So here's the start of our setup wizard. To get here, all I did was open up our QFinder Pro software and just navigate to it from across the network. So I just click login in the software once it found the IP address for me, and then I click login. So here we are at the setup. So I'm going to click the only button available here, which is Start Smart Installation. The first step is to specify a firmware version, so you can hit check for update if your NAS is online, and it's going to go off and try and find if there's a new firmware update. So I'm already on the latest one, so I'm just going to click next. So as we go through here, you can choose the NAS name, so I'll just name it the exact same as the NAS itself. Got to pick a username. We no longer use the default usernames on the NAS of admin, so admin will basically be disabled once you create this account. I'm going to click next. I'm setting this up to use just the default NTP time server. I've got the region set already to the correct region, so you've got different options there. I'm going to click next. I'm going to set it to obtain an IP automatically. If you need a static, you can set static. You know, if you click this, it just gives you all the information there, and you can choose which Ethernet port you want to set it on as well. So I'm going to just leave it on obtain automatically. Just confirm everything, and then I'm going to click apply. Quick warning that it's going to erase everything on the drives. Yep, I'm happy to do that, so I'm going to click initialize. So that's going to go off and run through this process. This will take a couple of minutes, so we'll leave this on, put this bit on fast forward for you so you don't have to sit through it. There's no interaction here. The next step will be logging into the NAS for the first time. So the NAS has now finished the initial setup wizard, and we're now at the main login page. So here I'm going to log in with the username I put inside the setup wizard at the start. and I'm going to put in the password that I used as well. Click log in on that one. So this is going to bring us to the main page. There's going to be a few things to agree to, so just data and privacy, scroll down and click continue. And then it's going to do a few little things are going to pop up here, just letting you know how to use it, some steps that you should take. So I'm just going to click through all of those. It's going to open up the storage and snapshot manager here. So here with the storage and snapshot manager, little wizard telling you everything about what you can do in here. So I'm just going to close that. We can see the drive setup here. So if I go to the disk section, so the disk section, I've got two M.2 NVMe SSDs. These are some WD-RAID SN700 500 gigs. I've got a pair of those. And I've also got 4 hard drives, which are some 4 terabytes WD-RAID Plus drives. So I've got 4 of those in here as well. So first thing I'm going to do is go to the storage/snapshots menu on the left-hand sidebar. I'm going to click that. And I'm going to go new storage pool. So here is where you would tick the box if you wanted to use Q tiers. So you're going to use the 2 types of storage here as 2 different tiers. I'm going to just do an SSD cache for my setup. So for now, I'm going to ignore that the SSDs are there, and I'm going to go down and I'm going to select the hard drives. So I'm going to tick all 4 hard drives. I want them all in one big storage pool. It's automatically suggested RAID 5 for me. All the different RAID modes that are compatible with a unit with 4 drives are listed there. Anything that's not compatible would be grayed out. So I'm just going to leave it on the RAID 5 option. I'm happy with that. So now I'm going to click next. Now you've got some options for the alert threshold. I'm going to turn off the alert threshold on the storage pool itself, because I'm going to use thick volume, so I don't need the pool itself to have the alert thresholds. I'll have it on the volume. I'm going to enable some pool guaranteed snapshot space, so I'll perhaps kick it down to about 5% here, so I've got enough room for some snapshots. Click next, and then I'm going to create, just confirming that all the data is going to be erased. Are you sure you want to continue? I'm okay with that. So once it's created the first storage pool with the RAID 5, the RAID 5 is going to have to synchronize, so it's going to take a few hours to get that done, but you can use it immediately. It'll almost immediately, as soon as the storage pool has been created, it should pop up a box that says, do you want to create a volume in the new storage pool? So I'll do that next. The volume is where the data lives. The storage pool is effectively what holds the volumes and where the RAID is applied, and things like snapshots would happen into the storage pool of any volumes within that storage pool. Once I've created the volume, I'll go over here on the left hand side to the cache acceleration option, and I'll enable the SSD cache to accelerate the volume that I'm about to create. Okay, so we can see that it's created the storage pool now. See some information behind this pop-up here. So now it's saying you must create a new volume to begin storing data. So I'm going to tick the new volume option. It's asking what type of volume, so I'm going to leave it on a thick volume. I'm going to put it in storage pool 1 because I've only got one storage pool. If you had multiple pools, you'd see those listed here. And I'm going to click next. It's asking how big would you like your first volume, so you can set this to be whatever you want. The first volume, let me limit it to 1 terabyte. I can create other volumes for different things, and you can choose the file system size option. So I'll generally here leave it on the default of 32K, but you can change this around. I'm going to leave the alert threshold at 80% because I don't have an alert threshold over here on my pool. I'm going to have it on the volumes instead. And I'm going to enable the snapshot to happen every day. I want a snapshot taken at 1 in the morning. So that's automatically done for me there. So I'm going to click next. You can change that later. So I'm going to click next. I'm going to click finish. So now it's going to create the first volume. So I'll just close that out. So it's going to initialize it. It's going to format that 1 terabyte volume I just created. It's going to create a couple of default shares and install a couple of applications from our App Center straight away. So then you'll be able to use it however you need to. So I'll just let this volume format and create itself until it says ready there. So one thing I will explain here as well is, whilst it does say ready next to the storage pool, it says synchronizing. If you want to check the status of the RAID synchronization, you'll see that there is a background task running at the top here. If you click that, it's going to tell you what's happening. So right now the NAS is very busy formatting, creating another volume, so it's making the disks busy. So with the default synchronization option, it is slowing down the synchronization, which is why the remaining time is very high. But once the NAS is finished doing anything to do with the disks, the NAS isn't being used for anything, it'll prioritize more of the resources of the NAS to getting that RAID synchronization done much quicker. So we'll see this reduce in time once the volume's all formatted, once it's ready, and I stop changing settings or copying data as such to the drives. But just so that the NAS performs well, it's stopped doing resources for the RAID rebuild to allow things like the drive format to happen a bit faster. So we can see now that it's creating default folders. So this will be like a public share or any home folders if you've got that feature turned on. So it's just going to create a couple of default options there. So we've already seen, as the formatting's finished, the speed of the RAID synchronization is coming up a little bit, but that should go up to a couple of 100 megabytes a second once we stop changing things. Okay, so we can now see that the volume says that it's ready. So now my next step, whilst we're still in storage and snapshots, is I'm going to enable the cache acceleration. So I've just ticked that box, click that option on the left hand side, and now I've got a big plus symbol, so I'm going to click that. Just a little introduction about the SSD cache. So you can do read-only or read-write caches. Because I've got two SSDs, I'm going to enable a read and write cache, so it accelerates data both into the NAS as well as out. So I'm going to click next. So here I've got the two SSDs, so I'm going to tick those. I'm going to change the drop-down box from read-only to a read-write SSD cache. It's going to automatically choose a redundant RAID mode. So if you're doing a read and write cache, I would definitely recommend a redundant RAID mode. So yes, it gives you a bit less space than, say, doing RAID 0, but it gives you protection in case you get one of these SSDs failing. So I'll leave that with read-write, RAID 1, click next. The SSD over provisioning, we do have a tool that lets you gauge how fast your SSDs are. Some lower cost SSDs, they may start slowing down. The fuller they get, the performance starts dropping off. So you can use the SSD profiling tool that we have in our app center to be able to put your SSDs through some different speed tests at different capacities to find out which level of SSD over provisioning you want. These WD Red SN700s are very good, so I'm only going to set it to about 10%. I don't need a lot blocked off. The performance is very high even when they get full. You can choose to do random I/O, so we give you an example here. So if you're using virtualization or databases, this is a good option for you. And you can set a bypass block size, so you can set what data is basically never going to touch the cache. So the larger block sizes, larger files, they're not going to touch the SSD cache. Anything 1 meg or smaller in this setup will go to the SSD cache, which is what SSDs are good at, the smaller block sizes. I'm going to change here to all I/O, so it just accelerates everything, which means the bypass block size effectively goes away. It's just going to put every piece of data coming in or out of the NAS through the SSD cache to accelerate it. So then I'm going to click next. It's asking which volumes you want to enable the SSD cache for. So I've only got the one right now, so I'm going to enable it on the main one that I've got. Click next. It's just telling you it's going to create a new RAID group. What's in the RAID group? Those two M.2 SSDs, and just a summary of the options I selected. So I'm just going to click create. So just a little warning here about the SSD cache. So really don't remove the SSD cache unless you've disabled it first. So I'm going to say I understand and click OK. This will take a couple of minutes, so it's going to create it. Right now it says cache type not supported. But that will change in a second as it starts creating it. So you see the status just below. It's initializing, so it'll change all the information once it's initialized and created. Okay, and there we can see the SSD cache is enabled. So now it says cache type at the top is read-write. Cache mode is all I/O, the options I selected. And down here we can see that the cache storage right now is just the main data volume. So if I was to go back to storage and snapshots now, the data vol 1 that we have before, we should see a lightning bolt right next to it now. So that's now saying it's got cache acceleration. Let's say you had another volume for another purpose. So let's say new volume, and this is for something like CCTV recording, let's say. So if I change the name of this volume to CCTV recording, again, I'll just do a 1 terabyte for the purpose of this. We've got different options down here. So this time it's not grayed out anymore because we have an SSD cache. I'm going to untick accelerate the performance with an SSD cache and untick snapshots for this particular volume, because I don't want snapshots and I don't want SSD caching on my CCTV recording. So something like CCTV recording, it's constantly recording from multiple locations, all your cameras at once. You don't really want that going to an SSD cache. The bandwidth is usually quite low. Performance on hard drives is enough. So there's no sense filling up your SSD cache with all the CCTV recording data. So you could tell our software like QVR Elite, if you were running that, to use the CCTV volume as its storage space. But that will not be SSD cache. That's just something completely separate. You're saving your cache for the data vol 1, the first volume that you created. That's where you want your data to live. So that would be probably the best option for setting up something like CCTV. So we'll see that data vol 1 has the lightning bolt, but the CCTV volume that we're formatting here, it will not have a lightning bolt next to it. So I've basically told the SSD cache just to accelerate a separate volume. So for anything that you want to accelerate or change, it's important to create them on separate volumes if you want separate preferences for things like the cache. You can't do it by just folders on its own. You've got, the SSD cache will accelerate the whole volume or no volume. You can't go just this volume but just a little bit of it. So this is probably the best way to set up the SSD cache for different things. You can create shared folders, some in here, some in the CCTV folder if you wish. So you can have some, let's say an archive folder in a different volume that's not accelerated because it doesn't need it, but there it's not got the lightning bolt next to it. If you ever decide that you do want it to be accelerated, you can always come down to the cache acceleration option. You can manage it, and there's different settings here. So in the settings, you can put a tick box next to the CCTV folder, choose what type of cache it's using, click finish, and then it's going to add it down here to the cache storage, and it is going to accelerate it. So it's not a decision that you have to live with forever. You can change your mind at any time. So if we go back to the storage and snapshots, we should see the lightning bolt appear. There it is, next to the CCTV folder now as well. So that's a basic setup here of the TS-435XeU, brand new 30 centimeter deep, 19 inch, 1U 4-bay rack mount with both 10 gig and 2.5 gig LAN ports, as well as the 2 NVMe bays on board the NAS as well. If anybody has any questions about this NAS, please do let us know, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks a lot. Bye.